On today's episode of Locked On Oilers, Stuart Skinner for Calder, who is the best Oilers defenseman, and the ghost of Oilers past. All that and much more in today's episode of Locked On Oilers.
You're Locked On Oilers, your daily podcast on the Edmonton Oilers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to Locked On Oilers podcast. I am your host and former Oilers game day producer, Brett Holden. As mentioned on today's episode, we're going to make the case for Stuart Skinner and the Calder Trophy. Yes, let's be real here. He has been, the best prospect or best rookie for the Edmonton Oilers so far this year, and he wasn't expected to be. We will make the case for him and the Calder Trophy in just a second. But also on today's episode, we're going to go through the underlying stats and talk about which Edmonton Oilers defenseman is the best and which one has been the worst so far this year. The answer might surprise you. Plus, to wrap up today's episode, we will wrap up with the ghost of Oilers past. And this one is, speaking of defensemen, one of the oddest in recent memory for the Edmonton Oilers. But either way, he still played over 100 games as an Edmonton Oiler. Yes, over 100. When you hear the name, you're going to be shocked by that too. Either way, thank you so much for making Locked On Oilers your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you find your podcast. Alrighty, Stewie, Skinner, Stu, the stew to Campbell's soup. Stuart Skinner has been a revelation for the Edmonton Oilers so far this year and has been exactly what the Edmonton Oilers needed in a season where, the Oilers goaltending hasn't been fantastic. The Oilers defense in general hasn't been fantastic, but the one pretty spot of it all, the one bright spot of it all has been the play of Edmonton Oilers draft pick, Stuart Skinner. Stuart Skinner has come in and played a part that the Edmonton Oilers, A, didn't expect him to, B, didn't want him to, but C, he's doing it without fail. The Edmonton Oilers were able to see Stuart Skinner in, I believe, 20 games last season. Didn't quite break that rookie quota, so he is technically still a rookie. So he can win the Calder Trophy. Now, the big question is, right now you got guys like Matthew Beniers, who's fantastic right now for the Seattle Kraken. And then the other competition, who may be the stiffer competition for Stuart Skinner and the Calder Trophy, Logan Thompson. Logan Thompson stepped into a role kind of similar to with what Stuart Skinner has to face, but a little different. In Skinner's case, it's a case of a goaltender not exactly living up to expectations, which has left the door open for Stuart Skinner to come out and play the game that he's been able to. On Logan Thompson's side, just before the season and after the whole hubbubaloo, there you go, I think that's the word, either way, when the goaltenders in free agency were finally off the market, then all of a sudden, Robin Leonard comes out and goes, actually, I'm going to miss this year, I'm having season-ending surgery. And Vegas is sitting there going, the hell, bro? Now they have to go into the season with Logan Thompson as their goaltender. And you're sitting there going, wow, this Vegas Golden Knights team looks like they are going to be in the mud. And they haven't. A lot to do, thanks to. Either way, words have been fun on this Wednesday. Is it Wednesday? There you go. Logan Thompson. Logan Thompson has been the reason why the Vegas Golden Knights have played the way they have and top the Pacific Division right now. However, if it wasn't for Stuart Skinner, do we even want to know where the Edmonton Oilers would be today? Because I would very hazard to guess that it would probably be in a very similar spot to Vancouver and probably looking at, I wonder how much Connor Bedard's contract is going to be in about 3 years. But they're not, and that is because of Stuart Skinner. So far this year, Stuart Skinner has a 2.76 goals against average, a .919 save percentage, and a .970 record. Now, Logan Thompson has a 2.70 goals against average, which is good for 15th in the league, where Stuart Skinner is good for 24th, in a matter of a couple of points there. And then Logan Thompson has a .917 save percentage, which is good for 12th in the league, where Stuart Skinner sits 8th. Now, here's where the separation starts to begin here. Let's talk about those advanced stats a little bit. Because there are some stats that don't necessarily go up next to the goals against and save percentage when you see the score bug for a player. Or for a goaltender, I should say. And that is expected goals against. So how many goals each goaltender is expected to give up. And then there's also goals saved above average and goals saved above average expected. The expected goals saved above average. Now, those go into effect when your team, like the Edmonton Oilers, are very poor at allowing shots against. As we've seen in recent games, the Edmonton Oilers have allowed way too many shots against. I mean, in a game where Stuart Skinner shined, they allowed 50 shots against. Stuart Skinner had to make 47 saves. And that was a loss. That's where this 970 record kind of sits there, and when you're trying to debate and contrast these two players, that's where it kind of comes into a little bit of controversy. But these stats start to tell a different story. The expected goals against comes from an accumulation of basically the shots that are against the goaltender, the quality of those shots, and how many of those basically you imagine those will go in. And that's a total expected goal value value of all Fenwick shots against. So Fenwick is a form of measuring these potential shots. Stuart Skinner sits 14th in the league with a 58.07 expected goals against. And Logan Thompson sits 16th in the league with a 55.7. Now, let's get into the goals saved above average. Because you can take that expected goals against and put that against the goals saved above average and sit there and go, this is what a goaltender is really doing. Stuart Skinner sits 6th in both expected goals saved above average and the actual goals saved above average. He has an 8.87 goals saved above average. 8.87. Think about that. 8 potential goals Stuart Skinner is preventing in each game he is playing. His expected goals against or goals saved above average is a 12.23. Oh, I'm sorry? It is expected that he would allow 12 goals a game if he was 12 goals essentially if he wasn't playing the type of game that he has for the Edmonton Oilers. You take a look at what Logan Thompson has done. He is 8th when it comes to goals saved above average at a 7.22. But his expected goals saved above average is at a 2.59, 30th in the league. So you can take the accumulation of these numbers, the goals against average, the save percentage, the expected goals against, and you can compare them and go, the average shot that Stuart Skinner is facing has a much higher average of beating him because of the quality of the shot that the Edmonton Oilers defensemen are allowing against Stuart Skinner than Logan Thompson is facing. Logan Thompson is only expected, has a goals saved above average expectation. It is a mouthful, I know. But his expectation is at a 2.59. Guys, Stuart Skinner's at a 12.23. That is 10 more goals higher than Logan Thompson. And yet, Logan Thompson still sits behind Stuart Skinner, in expected goals against saved, in goals saved above replacement, or above replacement. I'm a baseball guy. Saved above average, in, expected goals against, in save percentage, and is just behind him in goals against average. Playing on I shouldn't say much worse team, but a much more difficult team to play on as a goaltender, and is playing on one of the best teams in the league with the Vegas Golden Knights. And one of the best defenses in the league. As that expected goals saved above average, or above, average, expected goals saved above average tells. Right now, I'm giving the edge to Stuart Skinner as he has had the much more difficult workload than Logan Thompson so far this year. Then it becomes whether or not that is more impressive than Matty Beniers. That's for another argument, but I would still say Stuart Skinner, what he is doing is much more impressive than Logan Thompson so far. Not to take away of what Logan Thompson has done so far, because I think he has been a fantastic goaltender this year. But the numbers are right there. Either way, let's move into the defenseman and talk about even more deep stats, as that was probably already difficult enough to follow. But this next one is pretty cut and dry, as the Edmonton Oilers defense has been far from impressive. And after looking at the underlying numbers, you can see why. We will talk about that in just a second, but first, today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there. From pro football to college bowl season to basketball and the World Cup, they've got it all at BetOnline. Guys, the World Cup final is set. France, Argentina. Will Lionel Messi win his first ever World Cup? Reach the pinnacle for the GOAT? We shall find out. Wonder what the lines are for those over at BetOnline. Either way, if you love sports podcasts, which if you're listening to this one, you probably do, they've got those at BetOnline as well. They're always the fastest and easiest way for getting your sports betting info. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. Alrighty, as we move on here, who is the Edmonton Oilers' best defenseman and who is the Edmonton Oilers' worst defenseman? Well, we looked into the underlying stats, the analytical side, and we have an answer. Spoiler alert, is not the guy who's making $9 million, but this isn't a piece on him. But the issue becomes, what happens when the Oilers trade this guy? Their best defenseman, not the $9 million defenseman, their best defenseman. Because right now you're sitting here and you realize the Edmonton Oilers have an issue. They got to add defense. It seems like they're probably going to add a top 6 scorer, at least probably a top line scorer. A guy like Patrick Kane, Tarasenko, whatever. Probably a bottom 6 guy. And in one of those trades, the Edmonton Oilers' best defenseman will seemingly be included in it because of the salary cap dump. Because of the salary cap. And that's an issue. So we went through, as always, we go through my favorite goals against and goals for per 60 minutes in all situations and at 5-on-5, because those are the situations that all defensemen will be playing in. There's no discrepancy on, oh, this guy actually plays more power play. Oh, this guy actually plays more penalty kill. No, we're going to take that all, leave the what ifs to the side, and just use in all situations and 5-on-5. But I'm also going to introduce another statistic, another analytical figure to use, and that's save percentage. For defensemen, save percentage, team save percentage, and the save percentage that your team has when you are on the ice is very important. Your job as a defenseman is to make sure the puck is not going into the net. And you're able to see what those numbers are and what type of defenseman you are with these numbers. So let's get into it. Your $9 million man, Darnell Nurse, offensively has been pretty impressive. His goals for per 60 minutes in all situations is 3.36, and at 5-on-5 is 2.77. That is good for 7th on the team in both of those situations. And Darnell Nurse so far this year in 30 games, 4 goals, 12 assists, 16 points, which is actually good for 2nd on the Oilers defenseman in points. Right around where you would want that number 1 defenseman to be. However, it gets to the defensive stats where you go, not great. He has a 3.94 goals against per 60 minutes, which is good for 23rd on the team, and a 2.78 goals against per 60 minutes at 5-on-5, which is good for 14th. Now, you can also put into the fact, okay, this guy is going to be on the ice more often than most other players. Fair enough. He's going to see the goals more often, everything like that. Fair enough. I can get behind that. But 23rd and 14th is not good enough. However, he's still not the worst defenseman. Let's move on to his defensive partner, Cody Ceci. Cody Ceci is a surprising offensive talent for the Edmonton Oilers. At 5-on-5, he currently sits at a 2.21 goals for per 60 minutes, and in all situations, he has a 2.82. In all situations, he is 8th on the team when it comes to goals for, and at 5-on-5, he is 11th. Pretty impressive, honestly, for a guy that a lot of people sit there and go, he's not very good. Yes, he is. And he is out there. He is up in rushes. He can play physical in his own end, but he can get lost in his own end as well. But you take a look at the numbers, and they're not as bad. In all situations, though, they are pretty bad. A 3.63 goals against per 60 minutes for Cody Ceci, which sits 20th. However, at 5-on-5, he currently sits 8th on the Edmonton Oilers with a 2.26. So you have a little bit of a give and take a little bit here with Cody Ceci. He's good at 5-on-5. He plays on the Oilers' very shaky power play or penalty kill, so that number will dive up and down a little bit, but at 5-on-5, he is one of the best Edmonton Oilers defensemen. In fact, he is the best Edmonton Oilers defenseman. At 5-on-5, the best goals against per 60 minutes for an Edmonton Oilers defenseman is Cody Ceci's 2.26, 8th on the team. 8th. An NHL defenseman is 8th on his team when it comes to goals against per 60 minutes. That's the issue right there. That's the issue right there. But there you go. Cody Ceci eliminated from the worst Edmonton Oilers defenseman. A little bit eliminated from the best as well, but those numbers are still pretty impressive. We will come back to the save percentage, though, for each of these players. Let's move to Brett Kulak, because Brett Kulak has actually been the most consistent of all these guys. His goals for per 60 minutes in all situations sits at a 2.54, which is good for 10th on the team. And at 5-on-5, he is at a 2.7, which is good for 9th His goals against per 60 in all situations is a 3.47, good for 16th. And a 2.56 at 5-on-5, good for 12th. He has 2 goals, 6 assists, 8 points on the season, playing in all 30 games so far. He is a two-way defenseman, but mostly a defensive defenseman. So you see that 12.56. Considering Cody Ceci is the best Oilers defenseman at 5-on-5 in 8th, that's not too bad. You'll take that. For a middle to bottom pairing guy, mostly a middle pairing guy, second pairing guy, you'll take that. Now Tyson Barrie. Now, these next 2 names. Now, I left out Marcus Niemelainen, Philip Broberg, and Ryan Murray because those three players, the most amount of games that any of those teams or players have played so far is only 15, and that's Marcus Niemelainen. Literally half of the point here for Edmonton Oilers defensemen. All of the other defensemen have played 30 games so far this year. So we're leaving out Broberg, Murray, and Niemelainen. So we only have 2 more names here. One of them is the Edmonton Oilers' best defenseman, and the other is the Edmonton Oilers' worst defenseman. Tyson Barrie currently sits at a goals for per 60 minutes in all situations at a 5.12, which is good for 5th on the team. And then at 5-on-5, he sits at a 3.21, which is good for 3rd on the team. Now, we know Tyson Barrie is an offensive player, offensive defenseman, so those numbers shouldn't surprise you. However, these numbers should. Tyson Barrie sits at 10th on the Edmonton Oilers when it comes to goals against per 60 minutes in all situations, which is a 2.94. And then goals against per 60 minutes at 5-on-5, he sits at 2.4. One behind Cody Ceci, who is best on the Edmonton Oilers defenseman, and is the best Edmonton Oilers defenseman when it comes to goals against per 60 in all situations. All situations. This year in 30 games, 4 goals, 17 assists, 21.16 penalty minutes. He is a guy that the Edmonton Oilers... He is the Edmonton Oilers' best defenseman right now. But he is a guy that at the start of the season, the Edmonton Oilers imagined they were going to trade. Because the next guy, Evan Bouchard, was supposed to step into Tyson Barrie's role. He has done literally anything but that. Evan Bouchard, this year, a 2.77 goals for per 60 minutes in all situations, which is good for 9th on the Edmonton Oilers. A 1.78 goals for per 60 minutes at 5-on-5, good for 16th on the Edmonton Oilers. Speaking of 16th, he's 16th on the Edmonton Oilers when it comes to goals against per 60 minutes in all situations, with a 3.56. And at 5-on-5, he sits 20th on the Edmonton Oilers when it comes to goals against per 60 minutes at 5-on-5 at a 3.38. 30 games played, 3 goals, 9 assists, 12 points, 10 penalty minutes for Evan Bouchard. Now I hear some of you going, yes, it's just the stupid analytics, guys. You can't, it's the eye test that you have to. I completely agree. I am not an analytics guy. Until I took a look at the save percentage for all of these defensemen. And there's an outlier, a massive outlier, and that's an issue. Save percentage for defensemen is measured by the amount of saves your goaltender makes when you are on the ice. Basically, what the goaltender's save percentage would be when you're on the ice. Darnell Nurse has a .911 save percentage while on the ice. And it's not great. It's 15th on the team, so that's not good. Now, the rest of these players currently sit 8th, 9th, and 10th on the Edmonton Oilers when it comes to save percentage. Tyson Barrie sits 8th on the team with a .927 save percentage. Brett Kulak sits 10th on the Edmonton Oilers in save percentage at .925, and Cody Ceci is only like .02 points ahead of Brett Kulak in that situation. So still 9th on the team, but at a .925 as well. Evan Bouchard? 19th on the Edmonton Oilers with a .890. .890. Evan Bouchard's save percentage is a .890. He's not even a 900. He's not even 900. He is a sub 895 save percentage. For a defenseman who is supposed to come in and make the Edmonton Oilers and the Edmonton Oilers fans comfortable for when they were able to finally trade Tyson Barrie. However, Tyson Barrie has the best save percentage on the Edmonton Oilers, has the best goals for and at 5-on-5 and in all situations amongst all the Edmonton Oilers defensemen. He has the best goals against per 60 minutes at 5-on-5 amongst every Edmonton Oilers defenseman. And he's 8th. Ninth. Excuse me, 9th. Cody Ceci is at 8th. Excuse me. Do you see the issue here? The defenseman who was supposed to come in and be the guy that finally gave the Edmonton Oilers a cushion for when they're able to make a trade has done literally anything but. You want to know the only other players who have a worse save percentage than Evan Bouchard? Ryan Murray, Jesse Puljujärvi, Dylan Holloway, James Hamblin, and Brad Malone. The best Edmonton Oilers defenseman is Tyson Barrie, and the worst Edmonton Oilers defenseman is Evan Bouchard. There you have it. Tell me what you do with that information now. Do you still trade Tyson Barrie? What do you do now? Like, genuinely, what do you do now? You have the information. Let me know what you think you would do with Tyson Barrie and Evan Bouchard. Either way, let's move into our final portion of today's episode as we go through the Ghost of Oilers past. And this one's a little fun, but Taylor Hall didn't think this guy was a little fun after a warm-up incident. There you go. There's your little spoiler alert for that one. But before we get into the Ghost of Oilers past, I want to thank you for making Locked On Oilers your first listen every day. Now for your second listen, make sure you tune in to Locked On Sports today. From the games that matter the most to the biggest stories in sports. Go beyond the scoreboard and behind the scenes with local experts and insights only Locked On can provide. Locked On Sports today, available on this app, YouTube, and wherever you find your podcasts. Alrighty. To wrap up today's episode, the Ghost of Oilers past. And what if I told you, what is the first Edmonton Oiler that comes to your mind when you think of the number 44? Chris Pronger, maybe? Who else wore 44? Corey Potter? Yeah, Corey Potter. Corey Potter is today's Ghost of Oilers past, and yes, a very illustrious career as an Edmonton Oiler. His most notable time in the NHL as an Edmonton Oiler. As Corey Potter came to the Edmonton Oilers as a free agent signing, a Canada Day free agent signing all the way back in 2011. Yeah, 2011. Remember those days? He signed with the Edmonton Oilers on July 1st, 2011, thanks to a little bit of a recommendation from Tom Rennie. Yeah, the Oilers head coach at the time. Corey Potter made the team out of camp, and ever since then, it's basically history. He would go on to play 111 games as an Edmonton Oiler, score 7 goals, 23 assists, 30 points. His career high in games for the Edmonton Oilers came in that first year in 2011-2012, where he played in 62 games, scored 4 goals, had 17 assists, and finished the season with 21 points. He also had some time on the Edmonton Oilers' top power play unit. Shows you where the Edmonton Oilers were at at that time. He was also with the Edmonton Oilers when they took to Germany back in 2013, 2014, if I'm not mistaken. The other way around. He was actually with Germany, which we will get to. He was in Germany when the Edmonton Oilers came all the way to Germany to play against the Cologne Sharks. We will talk about that. But his 3-season Edmonton Oilers career ended, unfortunately, on March 4th, 2014, while Corey Potter was placed on waivers the day before the NHL trade deadline, as the Boston Bruins would go on to pick him up, and that would be honestly the end of his NHL career, really. Went on to play 3 games in Boston there, no goals, no assists, no points. Then went on to play 6 games in Calgary, no goals, no assists, no points there, and then finally 1 game in Nashville, didn't register any points. After that, he would make his way all the way to Germany, would play for the Cologne Sharks under Leon Draisaitl's dad. That is why when I was taking a look at trying to figure out what Corey Potter does today, which, by the way, that is the whole point of Ghosts of Oilers Past, to see what they are up to at this present moment. Unfortunately, couldn't find anything on Corey Potter. Just straight up enjoying retirement. That's all you can ask for. He would retire in the 2018-2019 season with the Cologne Sharks. He would go on to play 129 games there, 1 game short of his NHL career. In his NHL career, he did play 130 games. But in 129 games in Cologne, 6 goals, 28 assists, good for 34 points, only 4 points more than his time in Edmonton. Corey Potter, just what a name. As mentioned, he was a part of very interesting time in Edmonton Oilers history. He was the defenseman who unfortunately did cut Taylor Hall's face in warmups and started a mandate for the Oilers at the time for having to wear helmets in warmup. Now I'm pretty sure the Edmonton Oilers have nixed that, and you don't have to wear a helmet. But you see a lot of teams around the league now implementing that rule unless you are a veteran. But in fact, I'm pretty sure the NHL just implemented a rule that everybody, unless you were playing in the league before this rule started, you now have to wear a helmet. And that is thanks to Corey Potter and Taylor Hall. So thanks, guys. Corey Potter, your Ghost of Oilers Past. Let's wrap it up there as the Edmonton Oilers are back in action at home on home ice as the St. Louis Blues come to town and face off against the Edmonton Oilers for a 7 o'clock puck drop at Rogers Place. We will see who is the starter, and we will have full pregame coverage for you heading into that one tomorrow. Until then, I hope you stay safe. Hopefully you're still partying from yesterday and still playing La Bamba, baby.